Hello everyone. Welcome to this introduction to C programming. I'm Viraj Kumar. I'm a professor at Dayanand Sagar University in Bangalore. I'm also a guest lecturer in the Department of CSA at IISc Bangalore. So let's start with some important questions. Why C programming? Well, there are many reasons, but basically I want to focus on C because it's popular. And I don't mean popular just in the sense that many colleges and universities teach C programming, although that is true. But I mean it's actually a very popular language amongst professional programmers. And there are some ratings that IEEE comes out with every so often. They keep updating these. And you will find that if you go back and look at the last few ratings, C is consistently at or near the top. So there are other languages on this list that are more modern. C is a very old language, many decades old. And many of the more recent programming languages are more friendly to use. You can end up doing some very dangerous things with C programming, and many of the modern languages actually stop you from doing this, and this actually makes them easier to learn and make fewer mistakes with. But C remains popular, and if you go into software development professionally, you will probably come across some amount of C programming. You may not always write C code, but learning C will be useful. So for those reasons, we're going to look at C programming. Now, what do I mean by the basics? Everyone's definition is going to be slightly different, and I'm not going to give an exact definition. But basically, if you finish this series of lectures and you say, I know C, then someone should be able to say, well, if you know C, you should be able to do these things. Now, I'm hoping that I will equip you to do all the things that that person has in mind. As I said, everyone will have slightly different views on what should and shouldn't be in the basics, but I hope I will give you a good grounding into presenting yourselves that someone I know C. Now, why did I create this? I mean, there's so much good material out there, I know. I'm hoping that you will find the approach that I'm presenting useful. So I want to just contribute to all the good material that's out there, and I hope some of you find this useful. Now, you might ask, what do I need to get started? Very, very little. So I'm going to assume you don't know any programming. I'm going to assume you know some school level maths. That should be good enough. I'm also going to assume you have a computer, a laptop, or a desktop with internet. I don't think it'll be easy for you to follow along and actually do the activities, which is where the real learning is going to happen. I don't think you will be able to do that with a phone or a tablet. So I would recommend that you get a computer. A basic computer will be enough. You don't need much. All the tools that I will share with you are available online. So a decent network connection will be enough. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the approach I will take. I'm going to start with functions. And the first question you might ask is, why? Especially if you've learned programming somewhere, you might say, well, nobody else starts with functions. I mean, functions come later on. But let me tell you why I want to start with functions. The most important reason is you have seen them. You've seen them in maths. So you've seen things like this. This is a function f. It takes real numbers as inputs. That's what the first R stands for. And it spits out real numbers. The output is also a real number. And you can define the function. However, I have defined the function like this. So this function f, it takes a real number c, and it returns another real number, 1.8 times c plus 32. Now, is this just some random function that I came up with? Just pause the video and think about this a little bit. Can you recognize this function? It has some useful value. So if you've thought about this, you may recognize this as the function that converts centigrade to Fahrenheit. Right? So if the number C represents some temperature in centigrade or degrees Celsius, then multiplying that number by 1.8 and adding 32 gives you the corresponding temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. Now, you've seen this, as I said, and you might be saying, oh God, how boring. Why should we do all this? I mean, we've done this in maths. So let me try and tell you why functions don't have to be boring. I mean, okay, this one is useful perhaps in some sense, but let me give you something that's even more interesting. So this is my other reason for starting with functions. So let's say this function doesn't take real numbers and produce real numbers. Let's say it takes inputs from some set X. I'm not yet telling you what the set X is. I'll tell you in a second. So this function takes inputs from this set X and it returns either true or false. So what is this set X? This set X is the set of X-rays. And this function is going to take as input an X-ray and it's going to return true if that patient has cancer. And it's going to return false if the patient doesn't have cancer. So here is a function that can do amazing stuff. I mean, if we can write such a function, this could really save lives. It could also destroy jobs. So this kind of a function is very interesting. We would like to know if we can write such a function. Now, let me promise you that I said I'm going to cover only the basics. I'm not going to teach you how to write such a function. I mean, if you really wanted such a function, you should probably take some course in AI and build some sort of machine learning model to actually implement this. We wouldn't probably write such a function anyway. But the point is that functions can be interesting. Here's an example. So this is why I'm going to start with functions. So I'm going to use this strategy. I'm going to give you a series of functions to begin with, and I'm going to choose these functions carefully so that they tell you something about the C programming language. So we will learn the C programming language as we read these functions. And as I said, I will relate these functions to the kind of maths that I know you all know. But I will also try and choose functions that tell you a little bit about computers, how they work, and about computing in general. So we will understand what this means as we go along and see these functions. I hope you find this interesting. See you in the next lecture.